Well, hello, friends, and welcome to another Ask Zach. Today we are going to talk about the guy that played that. What I tried to kind of give you a taste of. That was Albert Lee. That was his solo on the Townes Van Zandt tune, Poncho and Lefty, and off one of my favorite albums of all time, Luxury Liner by Emmylou Harris. So yes, today we're going to talk about Albert Lee, one of the all-time greats, and I'm excited to talk about him because I've had some fun little interactions with him, and I've loved him, and his playing means so much to me. He is really kind of the guy that got me into the Telecaster and country music, so I'm giving props to Albert Lee today. So while you're thinking about it, if you haven't subscribed already, if you've been enjoying the show, please go down in the corner and subscribe. If you've subscribed already, then I appreciate you going to AskZach.com. You can go to the store and you can pick up a t-shirt or a mug or a sticker or a hat, or you can go down into the description and there's tip jar information. I appreciate you supporting the show. It's what keeps it going. So thank you. All right. So Albert Lee, as I've mentioned in, I think it was my favorite albums episode, I was hugely into Eric Clapton. Got the album Just One Night, and I was like, who is this other guitar player on there? And found out it was Albert Lee. Then I found a Guitar Player magazine article written by Dan Fort, and it was, I think, called Essential Listening. And in it, Albert indicated who his biggest influences were, and also they listed an essential listening for Albert also. So from that, I learned about the album Emmylou Harris Luxury Liner, and so I picked this album up, and it stands as one of my favorite albums of all time. One, it's just a great album, and two, it really showcases some amazing, playing. I mean, the band on it is ridiculous. You have the Hot Band and Ricky Skaggs, Glenn D. Harden, Herb Peterson, Mickey Raphael, the harmonica player for Willie Nelson. You have Dolly Parton and all sorts of, wonderful people, on here. Actually, I don't think Dolly's actually on here. I think I misspoke. She's on some of the other albums. But this is where I really heard Albert Lee. And it's the title cut, Luxury Liner. That's what really, kind of, as soon as I set the needle down on this record, and I heard the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, it was like I was in. And funnily enough, Albert's solo on that was recorded direct. He plugged his 53 Tele straight into the board and did that. So, but anyway, yeah, that album, really, really got me going. And then I started, of course, finding every album I could that featured Albert Lee. I remember ordering his solo album called Hiding that features him and the Hot Band, playing on it, that has kind of his definitive version of Country Boy, with Ricky Skaggs and Emmylou singing harmony on it. And I remember, having to order that, from a record shop in Corpus Christi, Texas, and waiting like months to get it, and being so excited, and paying like $20 for it. And so, and because of Albert, I started getting into Telecasters and started listening to country music, and also started, he also really influenced me toward rockabilly music. And so because of that, I started listening to, Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps, because of, the rockabilly, playing on there, and, of course the Ricky Nelson stuff with James Burton, and the Elvis stuff, and the Everly Brothers and Buddy Holly, which I know that's kind of getting out of rockabilly, but that really started getting me. It was Cliff Gallup that played on the Gene Vincent stuff that was really swinging. So that's how I got into Albert. So let's talk a bit about Albert Lee. Of course, he's an Englishman, but interestingly enough, he is a gypsy, and kind of grew up with that type of, I guess, a bit of that lifestyle. And he got into playing guitar, and then heard, because like most, he heard Lonnie Donegan, who was, a skiffle or kind of folk sing-along, singer. And then he got into country music, from hearing Jimmy Bryant and Speedy West records, and then hearing Buck Owens and things like that. And he had some inexpensive different guitars that he had, and he had some like European electric guitars, and then he started getting serious, and he ended up with a Les Paul Custom that he played with a Supro amplifier, a Thunderbolt, and his buddy Jimmy Page ended up copying that setup, and of course he used it for a very different sound on some of the Led Zeppelin stuff. When you hear that Supro Thunderbolt, and you think that Jimmy Page got the idea for that amp because of Albert Lee. That's interesting. Then Albert started playing a Telecaster when he found one, and Telecasters were hard to come by in England because there was kind of a little bit of a trade war going on, and U.S. made instruments weren't really allowed in the UK for a while. But he was able to find a used rosewood board Tele, and he played that, and he put a humbucker in the neck position, and I don't know if it was originally black, but it ended up black, and he and for an amp he had a 410 Fender Bassman, and ended up with two of them at one point. So that's a cool rig, a 60s Telecaster and a 410 Tweed Bassman, and nice rig. And then ended up using like Echoplex, not necessarily some different tape echo units that were made in Europe or made in the U.S. And he ended up in Head, Hands, and Feet, which is kind of a country rock band in England. And then through there he started touring and coming over to the States, and he started kind of making some relationships, started buying some other instruments. He bought his 53 Tele. He bought his Butcher Block Dave Evans body that he of course put a Strat neck on and a humbucker and different things. You can see that guitar in the Dave Edmunds Sweet Little Lisa video, the kind of the making of. And then he ended up moving to the States in the early 70s, started up a relationship with Don Everly, of course, of the Everly Brothers, who had split up with his brother Phil, and they started performing together. And he also started up a relationship with the guys at Music Man, and he started using the Music Man amp instead of his old Fenders. And then Emmylou Harris and the Hot Band were getting going, and they had, of course, they had James Burton playing guitar. But James had a higher level of allegiance to Elvis, and there started being conflicts in between the Elvis dates and the Emmylou stuff. And some of the other guys had already left Elvis, like Emery Gordy had already left. He was not working with Elvis anymore, and Glenn D left. But James decided to stick with Elvis, which I'm sure the pay was better, and he had a relationship with Elvis, going back further than obviously really a friendship with Emmylou. And so they were in the strange position of having to replace James Burton in their band. Well, they found out about Albert, and he ended up sitting in with them and filling in on a couple of shows, and they asked him to play. One of the interesting things is that Albert has said that you would think that as great as Albert is, they wouldn't be asking Albert to play like James Burton, but they were. They wanted Albert not only to play those parts, but to really mimic what James was doing. And that kind of makes me laugh. And but I get it. So but they finally kind of loosened up, and they let Albert be Albert, and you can hear his influence on the Hot Band and how it kind of changed the direction, and you kind of get the Ooh Las Vegas thing with James Burton, and then you get the Luxury Liner, and you get the string bender sound, and you get all sorts of different things, and also Albert played plays mandolin, and you hear a fair amount of his mandolin playing on the on Emmylou's records. Albert became a huge influence on a lot of players. A huge influence on Ricky Skaggs and Vince Gill and Steve Warner, and the guys in Nashville, and everyone was kind of getting more serious about Telecaster. And Albert was kind of the first like fast kind of chicken picking Telecaster guy that really played these really long lines and played these long solos and such. James Burton was a little bit more of a melody man, and kind of played more riffs and solos, but Albert would play these long single note line kind of swinging solos, and also his double stops and different things, and he really brought a different flavor to country music, and he had a huge influence on Brent Mason and everybody. I mean, everyone kind of had to pick up some of the Albert Lee mantle and learn some of those type of riffs, and even Brent Mason talks about getting a B-Bender because he was working with Emory Gordy Jr., who played bass in the Hot Band and was is married to Patty Loveless and was playing on a Patty Loveless record, and Emory wanted him to do a bunch of B-Bender stuff, and he didn't have Brent Mason didn't have a B-Bender, and so he did that, and then he eventually got a B-Bender on his guitar. So yeah, Albert's playing now. It's daunting to try to kind of play in the style of Albert, but to me, what Albert brings to the table is swing. He has a swing to his playing that's always there. And a lot of times he will play with just the pick, and he'll hold it actually with 3 fingers. He'll kind of, if you watch him, when he's doing a lot of this fast single note line stuff, a lot of times he'll play with the thumb and these 2 fingers holding the pick, and he'll do, again, this is my approximation of trying to show his style and how he kind of swings and plays single note lines. If you're going in the key of A. With that, I was just, kind of trying to show how he kind of, swings and kind of pushes the beat in different directions and will do these kind of bending things and pull hammer-ons and pull-offs, and he also has this kind of thing that he does that I'll show kind of slowly. He has this. This kind of thing, and it seems to start on this 6th and then kind of like bending it up into the 7th. It's like this, and all these chromaticisms. That's just my approximation of Albert's, kind of playing style. But I love his playing, and of course I've tried to imitate it to a degree. But then I, realized I'm not Albert Lee. So here I've got a couple, Albert Lee stories. One, I saw Albert play here in Nashville with Don Everly and Buddy Emmons at a little club, and was just a couple feet away from him, and it was just amazing. And I have to say that Buddy Emmons might have been more amazing than Albert even. And at one point, Buddy stopped using the pedals and just started playing his pedal steel with just the bar only, and was doing all these fantastic bar moves. And that comes from learning Hawaiian, guitar, non-pedal, before he went on to pedal steel. That was an amazing gig. I saw Albert Lee play with the Hot Band in the mid '90s. They did a reunion show, and they had Vince Gill playing second guitar, and of course they had Rodney Crowell and Glendy Harden and the normal Hot Band guys and Hank DeVito on steel. And that was an amazing show. Then later on, when working for Brad Paisley, I got to play with Albert. It was a show out in Los Angeles. Albert Lee shows up in a vintage, Ferrari, and has one of those little fold-out luggage carriers, and he puts his little Music Man 210 amp, and this is one of those 210 HD 130s. Those have 4 6 CA7 tubes, which are like big bottle EL34s, and it has a 12X7 as the phase inverter, and then the rest of the preamp is transistorized. And here's this little amp that's the size of a Vibrolux, but it's like 130 watts, and then it had JBL speakers. And I have to say right now that using JBL or EV speakers really help you get that Albert Lee sound. It's just that kind of quick attack and quick, the way it can respond to fast playing, and just its response in general, it's really conducive. So if you are wanting to go after the Albert sound, I'd recommend that you use a high efficiency speaker like that. And he had his little Music Man guitar, which it's really kind of like a non-tremolo Strat, and he had his Korg A3 unit, which is this multi-effects unit. And that's kind of the key to his modern sound, is kind of, some type of, Fendery kind of tube amp. And honestly, I think the Music Man amps from the 70s, the high-powered ones, are better than the high-powered Fenders of that same era. And that's mainly because the Music Man amps had more mids to them. So like a twin reverb from the 70s, especially the late 70s, will tend to be pretty hollow in the mids. And I think the Music Man amp is capable of more, mid-range and a little more impact to it. So anyway, back to the story. He shows up, and Albert, played, the whole night with the band, and then Brad let me come out and play with the band at the, for the encore. And so I have a CD of me, kind of getting to trade a couple solos with Albert Lee, and that was a lot of fun. Then we went into the studio with Albert a little bit after that, and this was just ridiculously cool. It was an Albert Lee album where he was covering a bunch of Emmylou Harris tunes, and he had he was doing the tune Luxury Liner, and he had Vince Gill and Brad Paisley playing on the tune, with him, and that was such a hoot. To go in the studio and there's Albert and his rig, and there's Vince Gill, and Vince also brought like an old Lloyd Loar signed F5 mandolin that he played, and I was just amazed. I think I already knew what a great player Albert Lee was, and I loved Vince's playing, but Vince really shined on that. His playing was very melodic, and he played great mandolin stuff. The first stuff that he played on mandolin was a keeper. He had to try a couple different things on electric, and he had a funny incident where he didn't like the sound of the twin that he had. It was a rental, and he kicked it over and plugged into a Dr. Z Carmengia with a Celestion Blue in it, and he did all this cool playing on there. But that was really fun, and I was really proud to be involved in that. And obviously I didn't play, but I was teching and making sure that everything was cool, and that was a lot of fun. And so picks and strings and stuff like that. Albert has tended to use a heavy gauge pick. I think at one point he used a little jazz picks, but then he went to the normal size, kind of like a Fender Heavy. Strings, he used 8s back in the days of like Emmylou Harris, and you can tell on footage where he's really bending all the strings and doing a lot of pedal steel bends and stuff, even without a string bender. It had like a 15 or a 14 for a G string. Then playing with Clapton, he started using bigger strings, and he kind of used this weird hybrid 9 set where it was like 9, 12, 15, 24, 32, 42, and I think now he's using kind of like the old rock and roll set where it's like 10, 13, 15, 26, 32, 42 or something like that. But, you know, he's always been a Ernie Ball Music Man guy and used that. I loved the sound of, you know, his 53 Tele into the Music Man amps. If I had to pick a favorite tune, a favorite example of his tone, it would be the Roseanne Cash tune, My Baby Thinks He's a Train. I think his playing and his tone on that is just stellar. I think also the Sweet Little Lisa stuff, which is the Dave Evans, that butcher block, you know, body guitar with that you had to get your own neck and electronics for it. But those are kind of good examples, you know, of that. So I'm going to have a Spotify playlist to kind of show some my favorite examples of Albert Lee's playing. I you know, love his stuff, and he was a real gateway for me into the Telecaster and string benders and you know, country music and rockabilly, and I'm grateful. So hope you've enjoyed this Ask Zach, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.